well, we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. I know that there's some regular attendees on the call, so welcome back. And for all of the new folks, welcome to another series of our LandApp / LandGate webinars. We put these together every couple weeks, and really the goal of these are to get as much information and knowledge out to United States landowners as possible. My name is Craig Kaiser. I'm the president and co-founder of LandApp. And joining me today is Sonja Howle, and I'm really excited. She has put together just a really tremendous presentation of looking at land ownership, and even more importantly, the individuals associated with traditional land ownership, and breaking them down into different characteristic personas. I've never seen anything quite like what Sonja's put together. I'm really excited to go through it and sit back and kind of listen to her. But I think you're all in for it, and I recognize some names that are on the call. I think we have some families that are very historic, large landowner families that may know of some of these personas and may be able to relate to this. So you're all in for what I think is going to be a very interesting topic. So Sonja, welcome and thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for the invitation, Craig. You know, it's just been a pleasure working with you and your team over the last few years, and I'm just honored to be here, and I know that probably I have a lot of friends on the broadcast too. So wonderful.
Well, before we get into your exciting presentation, I do want to cover really quick for the first time attendees here, what LandApp is. So just going to spend a couple quick minutes here to go over and cover what LandApp is. It's a really nice tool, handy tool that we've put together for landowners in the United States. And to access it, you can go to landapp.com. There is a free version, so you do not have to pay anything to get access to our marketplace. It is a very, very useful tool for real estate agents, landowners, property owners, anybody who's maintaining a property, managing a property, to leverage an open free marketplace. So let me say that very clearly. There is no fee, no commission, which is different than almost all online marketplaces. There is no fee, no commission. You post your own property to either lease it, get your property out in front of different, whether that be revenue potentials, whether that be solar developers, battery storage, data center folks, oil and gas folks. It's an open marketplace where you can self-list your property. You're in control of it. It's your contact information. It goes out in front of all of those types of developers. They reach out to you directly. Okay, so that's number one thing. It is a great marketplace. But within the app itself, you can go ahead, you can download it for iOS or for Google. We have it in both of those stores. But once you're in the app, you're going to see all of these pins. These are listings that are for sale, properties that are for sale, either been posted by real estate agents and pulled in from an MLS, or have been self-listed and kind of off the market properties that are only found on LandGate. You're going to see properties that are for sale, but you're also going to see properties that are for lease. Again, from a landowner perspective, you can post your property, no fee, no commission, to either sell it or to lease it to try to generate revenue for all of these different types of resources. So again, like I said, solar, wind, data centers, EV charging, oil and gas, minerals, mining, carbon credits, agriculture, recreation, you name it. You can put your property out there and see what type of revenue it can generate. Another thing that's really nice about LandGate, very easy, it's $6 a month. You can go ahead and, as I zoom in here, you're going to see data start populating on this map, and you're going to see landowners populate. So nationwide access to landowner data for $6 a month. But in addition to that, LandGate, as many of you know, creates an enormous database of proprietary data for every single parcel in the United States. We feed that up to LandApp, and that's what you're seeing here. So for every parcel, I can go ahead and see a quick breakdown, 0 to 100. What is the relative value? I can see the breakdown on that piece of property, how many different types of treed acres, deciduous forest, evergreen forest, pasture land, things like that. And then the breakdown of the value, get that for every single parcel. And then I can also get a breakdown of my energy scores and what type of issues I may have on the property. You see, I clicked on this property. Most people would look at it and say, oh, it's huge property, 441 acres. However, if I was looking to develop solar on this property, or maybe even a data center or something, I really only have 193 acres of buildable acres there. So it gives a really nice breakdown of what the property, what's there with the property. Then on the risk indexes, basically a phase one really quick, if there's any contamination issues, any issues with power delivery, things like that. Again, all proprietary analytics provided on LandApp. And then just a nice breakdown of any type, kind of your basic property ownership information. And then a real nice breakdown. Again, I can go through and look at the different soil types here. I can look at the different trees and the different tree species on the property. I can look and see what kind of amenities are nearby the property, and just a really nice breakdown of every single piece of property. So, it's an incredible due diligence tool, very useful to any property owner out there. Again, if you want access to the landowner information, it's $6 a month for nationwide access. And then the marketplace, again, completely free. There is no cost to the marketplace. If you want to get your property out on the market, this is a great way to do it. And again, you're managing that listing. You can delete it whenever you want. You can accept, deny any offers that come in. You're really driving the boat there. So that's LandApp in a nutshell. Again, Michaela, if you could put in the chat just links to LandApp to the website, and then also links to that app in the store. So the folks, if they're interested, they can go ahead and jump over to that. That would be great. So we'll go ahead and kick it over to Sonja here. But before I do, just a quick house cleaning. This is being recorded, so you will all get a copy of this recording sent to you in an email. We do like these to be interactive. So I want you, as Sonja is going through her presentation, if you have questions, feel free to put those in the chat. You can do that here in this chat. You can ask a question if you click this Q&A button. What we're going to try to do is we're going to try to get through all of the questions that you have during this 1 hour webinar, but we're going to try to answer all those questions after Sonja's presentation to give her time to get through the fun stuff that she's going to present on. So without further delay, Sonja, let's go ahead. I'm going to pull up your presentation, and give me 1 second here. There we go. We're at the presentation. Sonja, go ahead, please. Before you get into this, I want people to understand, number one, why they need to be listening to you. You are a land professional. You've been doing this for a very long time. You've worked with very large landowner families. You've worked with very small landowner families, and you're going to continue doing that. Please give us a background. How did you get into land? What are you currently doing? And what do the folks need to know about you before you get into your presentation here?
Oh, well, sure. Thanks. And sorry, I had to go for just a second. I did some rearranging and I forgot to plug my laptop in. So it was running low on battery. So,
no problem.
we're back for good.
Good deal.
But, well, I grew up on a farm and ranch on the Kansas-Colorado border, and I worked alongside my dad and grandpa for many years. And as you mentioned, I've been in real estate quite a long time. I started in commercial real estate, actually, in office leasing, and then I moved over to land. Always had an interest in it, and what really convinced me that I needed to go ahead and get my license again, and it is going through my family's own land transition, and just seeing that as an industry, I feel like real estate land professionals could do a much better job as far as working as a fiduciary and making sure that there are no regrets, decreasing the amount of family stress, creating more options for continuing to retain the property and continue that generational wealth. And so this is why I have been working for 3 years on this. As you know, we started as Geo Ranch, which was mostly a kind of a land for lease platform. But I realized that you just needed to go a little bit deeper. And I totally changed the business model. And that's why we're now Rooted Range. And I'm excited to kind of share how that model's changed and what's in it for the landowners, what's in it for the land brokers, what's in it for the developers. And, you know, and of course, one nice thing is we'll also incorporate how we use your data and how beneficial that is to us. So
wonderful. And you've put together a really cool presentation here, kind of based on, and I mean, this might be heresy amongst this crowd, but I've never seen Yellowstone. I never watched Landman. I never watched any of those shows.
You
but it
said
sounds
that.
like, right?
Yeah.
It sounds like you've gone through and you've kind of broken down what they got right and what they got wrong here. And you're going to go through that in fairly good detail here in your presentation, right?
Well, we can attribute that to a very long flight between Amsterdam and Dallas, this about 6 months ago. And I mean, I've always been a huge Yellowstone fan, and I think a lot of people are, but it was great to see season 5 and kind of remember some of the things. And it just kind of, as I was working on the land legacy archetypes, it just seemed natural to go ahead and show kind of some of the things that I didn't want landowners to think are normal, you know, as far as selling property. So that's it. So
I think it's great. Well, let's go ahead and get into it. And I want everyone listening to understand, you know, this isn't some theoretical thing that you've created, Sonja. This is coming from your own real world experience as being a member of a large landowner family that had to make some decisions and may even still be making some decisions with the legacy of that land and that property. And then your experience as a land professional, because you correct me if I'm wrong, it is almost identical problems, identical solutions to those problems in a lot of cases for every large landowner family. And even when I say large, I mean, we're talking in some cases hundreds of thousands of acres. But it's still the same scenario and process, whether it's a 5-acre tract that could have sentimental value for the family, right? So it really ties together with across all of those different landowners. So you let me know. I'm going to go ahead and drive the slides. When you need the next slide, you click next, and I'll drive it for you.
Well, and one thing I wanted to point out is, you know, my family originally gained their first 160 acres on the Colorado border through the Homestead Act in like 1872. And there were several family members that had homesteads through the Homestead Act. And so, yeah, they were a fairly large landowner family, but over the years, they sold it or let it go. So really the property that we were transitioning was actually a fairly small property. But yeah, you're right. I mean, whether it's small or large, it's the same kind of decisions that need to be made and the same kinds of decisions that have an impact long term. So yeah. So yes, I'll be happy to get started if you're ready.
Well, I've already gone to the second slide, if you're okay with that.
Yeah, sure. So let's see. Let me get mine up here too. Yeah, the fight is always about control, especially in Yellowstone. There's the control of the land, the legacy, control of what gets passed down and what gets lost. But in the real world, landowners may have more control than they realize. Knowledge is power. And again, why this work matters to me, a few years ago, my family faced a decision. After years of struggling with dementia, my father passed, and we had to decide what to do with a piece of land that had been in our family for generations. We could have sold it for the highest price, but instead we asked, what would he have wanted? And that decision changed everything. And so that's what I do today. I help landowners define what their land means to them, understand its current and future value, and then make decisions that align both. Because land can be your legacy, or it can be the lift to your next chapter. For instance, we did end up selling the land. Dad always wanted it to be a park. And so we were able to sell it to the city because the land was very close to town. And that's what he wanted. And so that we were able to accomplish that. At some point when it becomes a park, it'll be named after our family. And in the meantime, we realized that was his legacy and we honored it, but it was also my lift to the next chapter. That experience became my legacy moving forward.
Sounds to me there, Sonja, that you had a lot of family members that got along. And there may be some folks on the call, and I think you're going to get to these different personas, right? Where depending on the ambitions, not saying right or wrong, but depending on the ambitions and goals of individuals, that decision may be much more murkier and difficult to get to, right? Which kind of gets to where maybe you and your team can kind of help out. So yeah, kick it back over to you here.
Sure. Well, and the work around this mission, it's threefold. There's the Rooted Range podcast. I learned so much from other landowners and what transitions they've gone through, the mistakes they've made and things that they did that they're happy about. So I feel like it's really important to have landowners talk about transitions, about to have, you know, one thing I want to do is I want to put a team together of realtors, and we're going to look at different listings, you know, just so that people, a landowner, can see from a professional point of view what's there and maybe what's not, and how they can evaluate a piece of property for their needs. So we're going to do a lot of fun things on the podcast, and it'll start May 1st. And then also there's a consulting division. I did create this tool called Build a Legacy Through Your Land. And it's based on the work of two really wonderful estate attorneys in Salt Lake City who've written on how, you know, 44 values that changed the world. They've written on, well, here, the gift of lift, you know, which I talked about a little bit. And then, well, and actually I'm also licensed to use their value assessment to help both landowners and their heirs understand each other. That's like one of the first parts of the consulting is chapter 1 is what are your values? And I really believe that, you know, I mean, I'm getting older and I keep forgetting to kind of begin with the end in mind. And there was a group podcast of some men who meet weekly, and what they did is they wrote their obituary, and every week they read their obituary, and they just kind of, it was an accountability session to make sure that everyone was on track. And I really love that idea. What do you want your legacy to be? You know, that's one of the nice things we do is we help people define it, whether they're young or old. And of course it changes, you know, as time goes by. But that is a really wonderful tool. And then, of course, besides that, on the consulting, I help them understand the current and future value of their land and balance that with their values. And I think that made all the difference in the world. Every decision was easy for us as a family after we did that. So, you know, there are also some really wonderful opportunities, and that's why we created the opportunities on the land. It unlocks revenue through leasing partnerships and strategic transitions. There again, you know, there are some people that can really do some great work in terms of looking at the natural resources and helping a landowner transition and transform. And that creates value. And even if a family decides that selling is their best option, that work may be worth thousands of dollars more than it actually costs in the long run, because there are so many people looking for land. So, and they're not, a lot of the people looking for land don't know where to start. So that's why creating a business plan for your land and maybe leasing it to the new partner and letting them create the business and fulfill it, and then do a revenue share or some sort of mentorship in the process, everybody wins. Okay, next slide. And then most land strategies, of course, that you'll see are based on highest and best use, tax strategies, financial data, and yeah, highest and best use is number one. That's how we usually evaluate land, but we miss the people part. And yeah, I took the Yellowstone characters and did something fun with it, but I know from personal experience, this is not something to take lightly. You know, families have been destroyed, and brother-in-laws have shot brother-in-laws. There's, and it's even you know, Yellowstone, it was created by Taylor Sheridan, and Taylor, from what I've read, I mean, I don't know him personally, he grew up on a ranch in Central Texas, and when his mother and father divorced, she had to sell the land, and he wouldn't talk to her for a year. And I know that, of course, now Taylor Sheridan owns one of the largest ranches in Texas, the Four Sixes Ranch. And because I go from San Antonio to Kansas a few times a year, I go right up 83 through Guthrie, which is where the Four Sixes is. And just south of his ranch is the Nibalo Ranch, which has a very sad story about a brother-in-law killing a brother-in-law, just because they disagreed on what to do with the land. And it's you know, it's just something that I take seriously. But this is kind of a fun way to maybe look at it on a more light scale. So as you see, every land decision involves people, and even the best strategies can fail sometimes. But here are the standard legacy roles in land decisions. And I first learned about these archetypes and how they complement each other when I was a partner with Roy H. Williams Advertising in Austin. And of course, if you've been in sales for any kind of time, you've taken DISC surveys, and you know you know, there are usually 4 types of personalities that you need to know or understand. And this is no different, but I'm calling them legacy roles right now. There's the guardian, they protect the past. There's the wizard, they see the future. The warrior takes action. The healer holds the family together. And there's a hybrid disruptor who forces change. And so you can, if you know Yellowstone at all, I know that you probably have figured this out as far as who's who. So we'll go to the next slide. John Dutton, of course, is the guardian. He's the steward of stability. He's loyal, dependable, responsible, tradition-focused. Guardians protect the past and ensure continuity. They uphold values, enforce boundaries, and maintain systems, whether it's family, culture, or institutions. The shadow side, they're resistant to change, and they're very rigid. Okay, next slide. Then there's Jamie Dutton. He's the wizard, the visionary, and the thinker. He's insightful. A lot of wizards see patterns others miss and bring innovation and strategy. They're future-oriented. They imagine what's possible beyond the present. They have a shadow side in that they're detached, impractical, and they overthink. And then, of course, there's Casey Dutton, which is the warrior archetype. He's courageous, decisive, disciplined, action-driven. His role is that of a warrior that takes risks, confronts threats, and moves things forward. He fights for causes and leads the changes and brings energy to drive action. His shadow side, though, aggression, burnout, and control. And in Yellowstone, Monica Denton is the healer. She's compassionate. She shows deep empathy and understanding for others. She's nurturing. She builds trust and promotes well-being. Her shadow side is over-giving and avoidance of conflict. And she's unifying. She can connect diverse people through empathy. Next. Now, what about Beth Dutton? Beth is the wild card. She is not a pure archetype, but if you had to place her, you would say warrior wizard hybrid with guardian trauma. She fights like a warrior, schemes like a wizard, and lashes out like a wounded guardian. She's fiercely protective, brutally strategic, and emotionally scorched. She might be the closest thing Yellowstone has to a disruptor, tearing down structures, including herself, in the name of protecting what she loves. And this is a little bit more about the disruptor archetype. They'll most commonly have wizard and warrior elements, but very rarely healer or guardian. So it is a case-by-case basis. Next. Now, in the context of what we're talking about, let's take it out of Yellowstone and put it, at a standard landowner. The disruptor in this case, in this example, might be the young daughter who wants to turn a cattle ranch into regenerative agroforestry hub using carbon credits and direct-to-consumer marketing. The guardian, of course, is her father, who sees this as abandoning 100 years of tradition. And then the others. The wizard brother builds models, the warrior aunt wants decisions, and the healer mom wants harmony at Thanksgiving. So that is how it could work in a standard family. Yellowstone did get this right, though. There is an emotional attachment to the land. There, in their case, and in so many cases, there's development pressure, there's family conflict, and there's this term of legacy versus financial pressure. Okay. But what Yellowstone did get wrong is the fire sale thinking. Panic-driven decisions made under pressure rarely result in the best outcomes for families or their land. Urgency driving poor decisions. When urgency takes over, strategy goes out the window and families pay the price. Belief that we can't afford to keep it is often unfounded. It leads families to give up land they could have kept with the right planning. Now, I want to say one thing about this. My family got a homestead of 160 acres. They had to stay on it for 4 years and work it and improve it. And 20 years later, one of the 160 acre sections was actually sold for $480. Well, that land would be worth almost $500,000 today. So when I talk about generational wealth, you can see over time the difference that can make. So that belief we can't afford to keep it, can you afford to lose it? Might be a better question.
That's an interesting point, Sonja, and I want to touch on it really quick. And I explain, sure. In my line of work, I get to deal with, again, some of the largest landowners in the country. But I also get to deal with folks on Wall Street as well. And I try to explain to the folks who have never had a tie to agriculture or land, what land actually is to, because they see it as an asset, right? It's an asset holder, that these folks on this call have. You own an asset, right? You own land, that's an asset. what this actually is. It's not just land for them. It's what you were just saying there. It's their 401k, it's their retirement, it's everything that they have been working for. A farmer or a rancher doesn't pay himself a $500,000 a year salary, because all of that work and effort goes back into the land. That is his or her retirement, is that land. And like you just said, that 160, that quarter section, well, it's probably worth a lot more than $480 today. You're right, it absolutely is. And that's how people need to look at it. Your land is going to go up in value, down in value, and see it, the asset that it is. Land goes up, land goes down, but that is the retirement of some of these folks. So I just wanted to touch on that. That was hopping into my head very quickly of what the asset actually is. It's not just a piece of real estate that a commercial real estate investor would look at. There is a true tie to that, because it's the blood, sweat, and tears over 100 years that has gone into that property. And that's the tie to the land, right?
Yeah, that's very true. And that's why you owe it to yourself to take a look at it, as far as transformation and and transitioning it, not into sale necessarily, but just transitioning, and and then creating more value for you or for someone else in the future. I agree. That's a very good point.
We'll tie this back, right? So you're saying that they got that wrong. That their tax and estate planning, they didn't do a good, that's not realistic. That's not the way it's.
No, the thing is federal estate tax is not due for 9 months, and you can get a 6-month extension, and you can actually even work with the government to pay it back over time. So when they, like the following week, had a sale of all the the livestock and everything, and just, well, anyway, it was it could have been looked at a little bit differently, I guess is what I'm saying. So, and then also there was the Yellowstone solution of Casey came up with. He came up with a friend who had sold a car, or an expensive car, for $1, and so he told Beth, wouldn't taxes be based on $1? Well, that's great TV, but it's not real world strategy. What actually happened is they did sell a ranch at $1.25 an acre. Ownership transferred and development was restricted. Well, that's emotionally powerful, but not legally realistic. And by the way, development was restricted. Jamie had tied a development lease to part of the land. And in some of the final episodes, it was contingent on the state committee allowing it to go from ag to commercial. And so what John Dutton did is he pulled those 3 or 4 men in a room with him, had a bourbon, and they decided they would not allow that to go from ag to commercial. So that made the lease it made the lease go away. So again, that's probably not realistic, but it worked in Yellowstone, and that's good for the Duttons. I'm glad it did. So anyway, but as far as this $1 sale or $1.25 an acre sale, what doesn't hold up is estate taxes are based on fair market value, not on the sale price. And taxes are due within, there was another fallacy that taxes are due within months of the estate event. There's little time to maneuver. Well, that's really not true. And the scrutiny risk, undervaluation triggers scrutiny from the IRS and can result in significant penalties. Well, that's true. That is very true. So those are just some of the things that in that last season 5 that I noticed that were just something that I wanted to make sure people didn't think were, was a good way to sell land or whatever. So, okay. So what would work in real life? Well, obviously, if they would have had family alignment and accurate valuation, strategic planning early, and maybe even looked at a conservation easement to restrict development, those are some things that might have worked. They might have helped. So but of course that wouldn't be very good TV. It would be pretty boring. So anyway,
TV like that doesn't buy the 4 6s.
No, that's a very good point. That's a very good point. And I'm very impressed with some of the new programs he's come out with too. So anyway, why families still lose land? It's not because they lack the tools. Decisions happen too late, families aren't aligned, and roles aren't understood. That's just the fact of the matter. So next, where LandApp comes in. Now that data creates clarity. It helps you understand your land value, identify opportunities, evaluate demand, and assess location and surrounding land. But of course, data isn't enough. It doesn't solve family conflict, emotional decisions, and legacy alignment. Even the most sophisticated data tools can't replace the human work of understanding what land means to a family and what they want it to mean for generations to come. Best decisions happen when you're able to balance your values and the current and future value of your land. Your land may be your legacy or the lift to your next chapter. And you don't have to sell to create value. There are options like new revenue and enterprises, partnerships, renewables, recreational and tourism, and agricultural innovation. And this is the work of our Build a Legacy Through Your Land course and the opportunities on the land. So one thing that I would love to do, because I do learn so much from landowners and other brokers who have maybe dealt with land transition or transformation, I'm building that podcast, and I'd love to invite anyone to be featured on that podcast. And also, I'm offering, a founding group entry into the Build a Legacy Through Your Land step-by-step framework. And that founding group will be at no charge, and maybe the first 25 or so would be at no charge. And I really would love to have more input from some of the landowners that I'm working with on how to make improvements on it. So there's that. And
so, Michaela, before we go to the next slide, Michaela, can you put Sonja's contact information, her email, in the chat? I know we have it on a slide, but can you put her email in the chat just so people could go ahead and grab that and copy and paste it in an email? Again, if you're a landowner out there and you would like to participate in some of the exciting stuff that Sonja is working on, that's what she's asking for here.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. And then again, I'd just love to hear your story. If you're navigating a transition, a land decision, or an opportunity, send me a short paragraph at Sonja@sonjahowle.com, and or rootedrange.com. My website is full of schedule your 30-minute discovery call here, and we can definitely use those discovery calls for you to tell me your story about your transition, your land decision, or your opportunity that you're wanting to evaluate. So there's that as well. And I might just say, yes, rootedrange.com. That's the website, and it actually has links to opportunities on the land and the Rooted Range invitation. So
well, wonderful. I have a couple questions here for you, Sonja,
sure.
And I'm gonna go back, right, because you said you and your family kind of went through this, right? You guys went through a scenario where you had to make a decision. It sounds like your family was all very well aligned. Everybody was well behaved. It wasn't, your brother-in-laws were not shooting at each other, but
no murders.
That's not that story of maybe not shooting at each other, but severe conflict breaking out is certainly something that happens, I would say, more commonly than not. And especially when difficult decisions or potential radical changes could be happening on the land, everybody could have gotten along very well, last Christmas, and might be planning to go and see each other here in a couple weeks on Easter. But as soon as money starts being involved, it's really interesting what that can do to the dynamic. So going back to this, I want to expand on that a little bit, but I want to understand, what role did you play in your family? Which one of these were you?
Let's see. I'm going to go back to that slide.
I think it's slide 9.
Let's see.
So there's the guardian, the wizard, the warrior, healer, or disruptor. Which one of those? And I have it up on the screen too, Sonja.
Yeah.
Which one of those do you feel you played? And I have a follow-up question to that.
Yeah, I suppose I was the guardian in this case, but it was just my other 2 sisters and my mom and I, so we all kind of had my father's best interests at heart, so were we all guardians in that case.
That makes sense. That I think there's going to be a similar dynamic, I think, with in everybody's family. I guarantee you, as you were going through this, and you'd go to John Dutton. Again, I've never even seen the show, so this is a very good summary for me. But I think everybody inherently, just as a normal human, they see the core traits and they see all the good things there. It's like, oh yeah, that's me for sure in the family. I do that and then you go to the next one. Oh, but I also do this too. And then you go to the next one. Well, I'm also doing that as well. And the next one, oh, I'm doing that as well, right? So I'm pretty much doing all of these things. I be willing to bet there's someone out there listening. Well, I just do all of this.
Yeah, that could be.
I would say to those that you might not be doing any of them. If you think you're doing all of them, you might not be doing any of them. Right? And I'm a firm believer in that. If you can either do a few things very, very well, or you can do a lot of things fairly average. And I think that's important to go back to. This is identifying and truly understanding what the roles are, the decision-making roles, when decisions are made like this. We started LandGate, LandApp with just doing oil and gas minerals, doing subsurface minerals. And we saw, it was almost on a daily basis. I would be on the phone with a family just tearing themselves apart. Sadly, it was heartbreaking. I don't have a large legacy of land or minerals or anything, but it broke my heart to see what was going on with some of these families, because again, it was significant monetary value. It was a lot of work, and there was different paths to what people were wanting to do. And I saw, and I still see this today. Sonja, you can confirm whether or not this is true. When the choices and options are very limited of what can be done, that's where I see the biggest conflict. That's where I see, because we either have to do A or B. There's not, well, we can do A with sub bullet point A, 1, 2, and 3, and then also factor in B. And I think that's kind of what you're getting to, is the more options you have and the more possibilities that you have, and you summarize that well here in looking at this slide. I went down to slide 27. Looking at all of the different options there, right? You mentioned conservation easements. You mentioned leases, partnerships, selling and leasing back, or leasing and selling it back. Different options there. There's a lot of different ways to skin that cat versus, well, this person has to get what they want and I need to get what I want, or we're going to burn the whole thing down. Right. And that's where I think what you do could really, really be a benefit to some folks, is just hearing some other ideas. And I love the idea of your podcast, getting out there and having other landowners listen to other landowners. And this would be my biggest gripe against maybe my favorite demographic class on the planet is the American landowner that raises our food. basically keeps us alive. I don't think they're looked high enough upon in our society, but they don't talk to each other in a way that's beneficial to each other. It's very, very competitive. You could have your 160 acre homestead tract in Colorado, in the Kansas-Colorado border. Well, I guarantee that other quarter was also homesteaded probably at the same time. Parallel paths of families that are extraordinarily competitive. At the end of the day, it is business, right? It is, you're trying to generate revenue, and it is competitive. But I've seen it where very few landowners will share. If they find out, let's say you found out something about taxes. Hey, I could do this. That's going to save us a ton of money. Instead of sharing that with their cousin who may have 1,000 acres across the county, well, I'm going to kind of keep, and I've seen this, right? I've seen this. I don't know which archetype it is, but I've seen this and I see it repeatedly. I'm going to keep this to myself, because if we can keep doing this for the next 3 or 4 or 5 years, I know they're struggling to pay to keep their cash flow going too. I might be able to buy that piece, right?
Yeah.
Have you seen that, Sonja?
Yeah. Yes. I know exactly what you mean. It's really kind of amazing. For instance, there was a large land sale that I'm familiar with, and because of when it was, and because of the interest in land to investors, the landowner was able to get more than he expected, and he also, in the meantime, though, shut out his neighbors.
Thank you. That's exactly what I was going to say. He's not competing. You landowners, you're not competing with your neighbor landowner anymore. You're competing with an institutional investor who has who truly looks at it as a financial vehicle, because that's what it is for them. They haven't poured 100 years of effort into it. So I really like what you're doing with the podcast of getting other landowners on there, having them talk through the scenarios that they're in, things that help them, things that hurt them. I think that's a very, very good thing. I think that could be very constructive.
Great. Well, yeah, I think it will be too. I'm pretty excited about it.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, here, I'm going to stop sharing my screen really quick. Okay. And we'll jump back. We'll jump over some questions. There's some questions that have been submitted. Some stuff was emailed to Michaela. And Joe asks a question. I think he was directing it towards LandApp. Can it track desert land in the U.S.? Well, I'll go ahead and jump back in. I'll just show you an example of what that looks like, because I showed a forested land piece of land down here in Georgia. Let's go to an area where it's not as forested. Let's go down to New Mexico here, and kind of the same thing here. Let me go ahead and this. We can go ahead and take a look at, we have all of the all those values there, and I can go ahead and turn on this. What I really like, if I just want to look at the data, I can go ahead and turn on that portion, and it's going to break down for me all the different types of land there. So, desert land, this is all pretty much sagebrush. But if we go to more of a transitional area, we can go ahead and see that that data is going to load. You'll see the timberland, you'll see the shrubland, you'll see the pasture land, and you'll see how that changes. And again, that's broken down on each individual parcel. So yeah, no matter what type of land you're looking at. So we looked at some forested land, we looked at some desert land. We can see a really good juxtaposition of different types of land. If we jump over here in California, we'll see a bunch of different crop types in the valley here, where a lot of our, again, back to feeding the nation, where a lot of our citrus crops come from. But then I can go ahead and pull up here over into the mountains, and I can see a bunch of different types of land there. And then if I want to look even further south, and I want to go ahead and look and see where the urban areas start, I can go ahead and see that. Again, that's just one land type. I could see soils, all of those different things. So again, it tracks a lot of different information across the United States. And again, you get access to the landowner information for $6 a month on that. So again, it's a really nice due diligence tool. But Sonja, back to a couple questions for you there. When should families start having these types of conversations around estate planning, being intelligent with taxes, potentially looking for additional revenues, whether that be a lease or some other aspect? When should these folks get together and start talking about this in a realistic fashion?
Yesterday.
Yesterday. So it already
Yeah.
should have happened. If they haven't,
Well,
if they haven't, how do
yeah.
they begin? Because I'm sure, again, every Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter, they get together, they sit down and they talk about, well, what's going to happen when this person may no longer be interested in the farm or the ranch or, the hunting track, whatever it is. If someone feels they are the guardian there, or maybe they're the ones that's the wizard because they're thinking this out. It's like, if we don't do something, if they're my age, my grandkids aren't going to be on this property because financially it's not penciling the way it needs to. How do they have that? How do they start the conversation?
Well, the way I see it, there are probably, like with our situation, my mom and dad had a will created, and thank God my dad, even though he struggled with dementia for 7 years, we remembered the conversation we had with him about him wanting it to be a park before 7. And so we were just, but my mom and dad did a really good job of doing that and then discussing it with us. But what I see happen that I really would like to see fixed is, you have this great asset called land. Take a look at it from a natural resources perspective and look at some guides who are already doing something similar to maybe what you're thinking about and talk to them. It's not too late to change your revenue stream or your enterprise. You have this great asset called land. I mean, there's, and unfortunately, I don't know if you're aware of this, but there have been more bankruptcies in the US, Chapter 12 bankruptcies, which are family fishing operations and farmers and ranchers. There have been more Chapter 12 bankruptcies in the last 2 years than in a long time. And, I know that banker is, relying on the collateral for each loan every year to be the land. And, that's something so many farmers and ranchers just have to do, is they have to use their land as collateral in running an operation. So when that operation closes, so does the land. Or when the land, well, anyway, you understand what I'm saying. But sometimes there just aren't any ways to protect the land.
I got you. I think that's good insight there. I'm going to jump over and switch gears to a couple of questions. Looks like Jen and Anna has asked a couple of questions, and it's about what you can see in LandApp. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again one more time.
Yes.
Jump over here. It looks like Jen asked, do you have a layer that shows properties under easement? And what is the other one? What is it required to see all the land data? Is there a cost associated with membership or just a cost for a free account? So again, like I said, there is different levels of the account. If you go back into the chat and you want to go ahead and just download, whether you have an iPhone or a Google, you can download LandApp and you can get into this map completely for free. You're not going to see landowner information unless you sign up, and that is $6 a month, and you get nationwide access to this. And I'm going to go ahead and answer another question. I think Cecil asked it down in Mississippi. He said he owns some land down there. If I wanted to know what roughly property is worth down there, I can click on any of these parcels and it's going to give me a breakdown, or I can click on my own exact parcel. So I clicked on that parcel. I'm going to click the land value index, and it's going to break down for me. The LandApp value on that is about $1,900 per acre. And here's the reason why: we have a little bit of deciduous forest, evergreen forest, and mixed forest. And you have a breakdown of each type of forest there. So that's where that value is coming from. So if Cecil wanted to go ahead and hop on here, and for free, he can go ahead and navigate to his own parcel on the app, click on it, and get this report. You get, I think it's 1 or 2 of them for free. So you don't have to pay us anything. You can go to the app and you can click on your parcel, find it. You can navigate either by address, city, lat long, parcel ID, the owner name. You can search that way, or you can just navigate to it on the map and click on it. To Jen's question about easements or things like that, let me just go ahead and go to an area where we'd be able to see a large amount of easements. If I wanted to look at a piece of property, let's say I'm going to let these parcels load. Let's say, just for instance, this one here. You can see that it hops in here, very high value for solar energy. If I click that solar energy, it's going to load easements. Now, this isn't going to load every single easement under the name of the under the sun, but it's going to load a significant amount of them. And you can see that here, this yellow line. There's an easement there for a transmission line. If there was natural gas pipelines, you'd see those easements and things like that. So you will get, and you can see that I didn't know that at all. Looks like there's an old railroad going through there. So there's likely a railroad easement running through that parcel as well. So there I can get a real high level understanding of what I'm looking at on that parcel. And then I think, yeah, I did answer on Anna's question as well. So yeah, I get access to all of this. I can export this out in a really nice, clean report that's great. It's a nice PDF, includes all of the data, all of this information. Or I can email that to anyone as well, straight away from the app. So pretty powerful tool. Again, if you have any questions on that, feel free to go to LandApp, submit any questions here that you have, or reach out directly to us. Michaela, you can go ahead and put your email in there as well. If you have any questions getting logged in, getting signed up, please email Michaela. And then also, the PDF that we went to, Sonja, I'm sure that are you okay if we send that out and share that with everyone?
Absolutely.
Awesome. Very, very good. Well, let's read this one more before we wrap up here. Looks like Mark has a question or a comment here. Paid for a 160 acre farm, signed a solar contract for 2,500 acres. We did not. Road to ruin my legacy for my children or not. Ag timber value, what dies due to not value an hour later. Well, I mean, that's to each their own, right? And this is the kind of the beauty of the United States of America. And I'm a big stickler on this, is that each individual has the right to do on their property what they would like to do. And that's something that's important. And I think it's a good end the conversation this way. This is the only country in the world where landowners like Sonja and those of you out there have the right to do on your property and make revenue off of the natural resources on your property the way you see fit. Every other country on the planet, it is only under control by the government or the crown. So if you have mineral rights on your property, you earn money from those mineral rights. No other country on the planet allows a landowner to actually own that. It's a very special thing. It's a very special thing we have in the United States that's granted to us by the Constitution of the United States. Am I always happy with what my neighbor does? Not always, but that's his property and I have my property. He's probably not always happy with what I do either. I have 4 little girls running around. It's a beautiful day right now and they're very loud. So they're probably annoying my neighbors right now as we speak. But with that aside, if you also have any questions, Sonja works with landowners for a living. She does a phenomenal job. reach out to Sonja. Her contact information is in the chat. And again, we will be sending out a recording of this webinar, and we will also be sending Sonja's slide deck. So Sonja, I'm sure Mr. Sheridan will be reaching out soon. But we'll see. We'll see how that goes. Sonja, thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, actually, on my last trip through Guthrie, I left him a copy of the archetype analysis, and so he's aware of it, and he's fine with it. So that's
he might have some feedback of like there needs to be a couple villains in there, because I know there's some landowners out here thinking is like, nah, she's missing a couple. My cousin, no, he needs to be down here in this corner in a whole different category, or the brother-in-law, sister-in-law, whatever it is. Like there's probably a few others out there, but I understand, you know, being very, very nice and polite. We're just going to talk about the ones that are doing nice, positive contributions.
That sounds good.
Awesome. Well, Sonja, thank you so much. Michaela, thank you for organizing, helping out with the questions and things like that. Like I said, be on the lookout for an email from us. And also be on the lookout for the next webinar that we're going to have. So thank you, everyone. Have a great day. And Sonja, thank you again. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Craig. Thanks, Michaela.
Have a great week.